So this is a screencast for your physiotherapy practice educators course for the second day for it. So this is around giving effective feedback. So we're going to discuss around what effective feedback is, why we give feedback, having a think about different times and places, and how to give effective feedback really. So I'll be getting to pause this screencast at certain points to have a think about what it is that you have experienced or what it is that you think that you need to work on and do. So the importance of feedback links to day one. So we have to complete formative assessment. So formative assessment is like an unofficial assessment, but obviously everything goes towards final marks that we do see. So if you can't give feedback, you can't gain information from the students as well. So you need to see how they respond to feedback, give them time to act on it, and so that you can assess them more thoroughly. It's to give the student your professional viewpoint on their performance and their behaviours as well. So they are there to learn from you, but also learn from themselves. But sometimes they just need that little bit of guidance, and you are the expert here. They are still learning, they are still students, as you are as well. But you are the expert, and you can give them some much more structured feedback in what they need to change and do. So it's also to promote their development, so their psychomotor skills, knowledge, attitude, behaviours, self-appraisal, and feedback can be on anything at all. It can be on something that they're engaging with clinically or non-clinically, or how they interact with staff members. Feedback can be on absolutely anything. But you can also have two-way feedback, so that you can get them to feedback to you around how they think they're doing. So we'll discuss different parts of that. So having a little think about, I want you to just have a little think about receiving feedback. So different people can react very, very differently to receiving the same feedback. So I just want you to take a minute here and just have a think about this quote and see how you react. What do you think of this feedback? And then I want you to have a think about how might someone else take that. So your note writing is improving, but you're still missing things out that are really important. So, how did that feedback make you feel? What did you take from that piece of feedback? See if you can flip it. See if you think how might someone else interpret that as well. So have a couple of minutes to think about that. So these are kind of some examples of how people might kind of react to that statement. They aren't the only way, sorry, and they people can react in very, very different ways. But two kind of extremes of what you might see is someone thinking, oh, I'm useless at this, I'll never be any good. So what you've said is they're improving, but you're still missing things out that are really important. So although the feedback may have been well structured, um, one person might just take that as, oh, I'm never any good, I can't do anything right, how am I ever going to get this right? Whereas on the other hand, you might get someone that becomes quite defensive and goes, well, you're not so perfect either. And true. No one is ever perfect, and I don't think if you looked at any single one of our sets of notes, they would all be 100% perfect 100% of the time with absolutely every single tiny little detail in a really succinct structure. We're always going to have days where they're not so perfect, but it's about them taking on board. Actually, that's we're not comparing ourselves. Feedback is about the individual, so people may react in different ways, and it's about you adapting your feedback to the person, but also encouraging them to adapt to your way of giving feedback as well. We've got to meet in the middle, haven't we? It's not all about them or all about you. So we've got a couple of principles of giving feedback. So the kind of main principles are establishing a supportive environment. So everybody makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. I'm sure all of you will still make mistakes now, and you will forever in your career make mistakes. Obviously, some are more significant than others. Some are kind of really severe safety mistakes that may end up with severe consequences. And as a student, that can be the difference between passing and failing a placement just based on one incident that they engaged with. So, but for the most part, it's having that supportive and encouraging environment. If people don't feel willing or like they can make mistakes, people tend to not learn very well. So we need to make sure that we give that safe environment so that people are free to make mistakes and learn from their mistakes. And by mistakes, I don't mean catastrophic errors, just small things that they could do better or do differently next time. Because we all learn from doing things and them not working out quite the way we wanted them to be, and repeating and doing again. So have a point of reference and try and be really specific. The best feedback is using an example. So you did this. So you did the passive movement. Your hands were on this position, and this was incorrect because of this and this and this. Or you did this and that was good. So having really specifics, it's a lot harder for people to act on feedback if you say, well, you're just not very good with patience. In what way we're not very good? Well, you're just not very good, and so it's really hard to act and develop and progress. And actually, they might turn around and think, well, surely you don't know what I'm doing right and wrong if you can't give me that feedback either. So really clear points of reference and be really specific. And then consider your own body language as well. If you wanting someone to open up to you and be perceptive to your change, having really open body language rather than quite closed and harsh body language can really help. And also prepare the student. Now, sometimes just doing ad hoc feedback during or after you've seen a patient is quite easy, particularly for you who is experienced in seeing patients. It's a lot easier to reflect. Sometimes students might just need that a little bit longer to reflect because it's all completely brand new to them. They just need that little bit of space to have that time to reflect. So giving them, shall we talk this through after lunchtime, gives them half an hour or so to go, okay, what have I done? What do I need to learn? What should I have done better? Or what questions do I need to ask that I wasn't sure about how I did? Just giving them that time to prepare can mean that that feedback session can put them in the right headspace for receiving feedback as well. Can really help make the session be a lot more effective. So avoid being judgmental. That sometimes can be quite difficult, particularly if you've got someone that has done the same thing wrong repeatedly and you feel like you've given them the chance and given them really open feedback. But it's really important to avoid that judgmental feedback and avoid being judgmental in those sessions, because as soon as you get into that scenario, the relationship breaks down completely between two people, and then moving forward becomes really, really difficult. So achieving a balance, again, if a student's doing really, really well, you don't want to just go, you're amazing, you're doing all this fantastic. There's, no matter how good somebody is, there is always little things that they can be working on to be better and do better and be productive. But also, if somebody is doing really, really bad and they're really struggling and they're either failing or borderline passing, and you think every day there's this and this and this they're not doing, there is still something that someone is always doing that can be seen as a positive. So make sure you do give a balance. Obviously, if someone is really struggling and not doing very well, the balance may be tipped a little bit. The same as if someone's doing amazing and doing really, really well. Again, the balance might be tipped in you giving them significantly more positive feedback. But at least there definitely needs to be some positive and some areas to work on. So offer some alternatives or ask the student to suggest some improvements. So don't just finish, this is what you've done, finish the feedback session there. There needs to be that action plan. So thinking about how you engage in your supervision at work as well. If you know what you're doing wrong, but you don't necessarily know how to action that or what to do, you're not going to progress forward. So offering alternatives, but actually even better than that is getting the student to think of some ways of progressing or doing better, and then it's something that they have come up with, so they're more likely to engage with, rather than you going, you need to do this and this. If they've come up with some ideas themselves, it means that they're more likely to engage and more likely to be successful. They might just need some help facilitating and talking through those options. Referring to actions and behaviours rather than personality characteristics is really, really important. If any of you have ever thought back to it, if you've ever been judged for who you are as a person or a way in which you behave, if you're too loud, if you're too chatty, if you're too this, if you're too that, it can feel like someone's attacking you as a person, and that's not what we're doing at all. There are certain ways that you have to behave in a professional context. So actually, talking constantly with your colleague and not engaging with work, or getting your phone out and things like that, that is not appropriate. But it's not necessarily personality characteristics, it's the specific action. So you are talking too much to your colleague rather than doing the work we have set. That is a behaviour. Their personality is that they're really open and friendly and they want to talk to everybody, but they need to know what specific behaviours they need to reduce or increase during their time on placement. And put feedback into context. That kind of comes into making sure it's really specific. So in context of, this is why it happened, this is why it needs to change, or what you need to do better, or what you need to do to make things easier, and put it into context of how important that is, because some things are just minor and you're just trying to give feedback because that's really important, but some things are, this is serious, we need to address it immediately. So giving time frames and things can help really put it into context as well. So try and start and finish positively. So you'll have heard of a particular type of sandwich that relates to, and that can be useful, and it also just helps put people on that positive mindset. If people are more positive, they're more likely to act on change and go away and go, okay, well, I'm doing okay, but these are the things I need to go and change. Sometimes it is quite difficult, but particularly if someone's really struggling. But like I said, there's always something they're doing right. If they're turning up, then there is something that they must be doing correctly. So start and finish on a positive, but just make it really clear that there's lots of things to develop. Leave choices as well. So there's never just one way of resolving an issue. There's never just one way of acting on something or one way of learning something. So give options. If you've offered advice on areas that the student needs to work on, give them options of how to do it, because one way is not going to be the best way for everybody. It also gives them a choice to choose what they prefer. And like I said, when we're looking at motivation, if someone has chosen that themselves, they're more likely to engage and more likely to get a good outcome. And be motivational, so turning negative situations, so something that's gone wrong, turn that into something really constructive. So again, we're not just about going, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Challenge them, give really constructive feedback, get them to challenge and constructively feedback on themselves, to turn it on themselves and go, what did you understand by this situation? What do you think went well? How? Why? And turn it into something that is a challenge, but you're encouraging them and you really want them to get better, because we all know that you want these students to do really well, as do we, and we want these students to turn into really good qualified professionals in the years to come as well. And again, enabling learning and facilitating growth is all about having this kind of positive environment that you guys are achieving with your placements. So just take a moment to pause and have a think about when, where, and how to give feedback. So there's not one right answer, there's not a wrong answer, but just have a think about what you think is appropriate. When, what time of day, time of after seeing patient, where, location, is there anywhere you wouldn't, or is anywhere okay, and how do you give that feedback? Just take a minute to pause and have a go through that. So these are just some examples of where we may or may not give feedback. So we've got your formal versus informal, and obviously you can see all those lists there. So there is no right or wrong between formal and informal. It completely depends what kind of information you're feeding back. It might be on the walk back to the office after having seen a patient, you have a chat through about things that happened and how it went, and those can be some of the most productive informal feedback sessions, and that can develop the student the most. But you do also need those formal times where you sit down, you talk through stuff, you create action plans, because again, sometimes it's a lot easier when you've got space and time to write things down. Sometimes having those informal moments means that it's the student's not prepared or ready to receive the feedback as well. So like I said, the setting can be anywhere. You can do your informal feedback wherever you want, as long as everything's kept nice and confidential. But it is important that you do have the formal feedback times as well. And again, if someone's done something wrong that didn't need to be necessarily a safety problem that you had to step in on straight away, does it need to be given immediately? Do you need a minute to have a think about how significant that event was, and then give the feedback in half an hour after lunch, after you've had time apart and to think about the situation? And make sure you give enough time so that you're not rushing through. I'm sure all of you have been in supervision at some point or another where your supervisor's clock watching and going, oh God, I need to go, I need to go. And actually, you know that you're not the most important thing in that moment, and that doesn't feel good, does it? You're not likely to concentrate on the feedback that they're giving. And just having to think about last thing on a Friday, as you probably all are aware, is not the best time to give feedback. If that is the only time that you can feed into your week, then it's about finding what works for you. But if you think about the time of feedback, where people are most likely to receive feedback, and you guys as well, you will have had feedback throughout your entire student career, throughout your qualified career up to this point. Use your own experiences to identify what it is that you need and what you want. So again, just take a minute to pause and have a think about failing to give feedback. What do you think the potential consequences are of not giving timely feedback to students? So have a little pause, write out a list, have a think about it. Think about your own experiences as well. Has there been a time where you've not been given feedback that you felt like you needed or you wanted? And have a think through that. So, failing to give feedback can result in no change in the student's behaviour, because obviously, if they haven't had feedback, they don't necessarily know what they are doing correctly or incorrectly, or areas that they need to work on. Particularly if they are someone that struggles to self reflect, or just needs that facilitation to self reflect, then they are likely to not make any improvement. Um, it can often have difficulties in developing the relationship. If there's not that trust and honesty there, then it's really hard to build those working relationships. Obviously, the students are only out for quite a short period of time, with the maximum being around the 8 week mark. It can be quite difficult to develop that relationship if you don't have those open and honest discussions, and encourage it two-way as well. Get them to give you constructive, realistic feedback about things that you're doing. It might be that they would prefer you to give them a bit more freedom, or they would prefer their feedback at a different time, or they would prefer to work in a slightly different way. Encourage that two-way feedback, and then you build that relationship up, and it's a lot easier to give feedback to each other. And obviously, if you fail to give the feedback, the student's unlikely to reach their potential no matter how good they start off. If they don't have that constructive feedback, then it's really hard for them to progress. So there are barriers to giving feedback. So especially if the relationship has already broken down, or if it's sometimes you just don't click with people, and that can be the same with yourself and a student. So if that's what's happening, then you just need to make a again, reflect yourself and have a think about what can happen to build that relationship back up. Or does someone else need to get involved? You need help with their academic advisor to help build those relationships up as well. Your own personal values, attitudes, and beliefs obviously have always got a massive influence on how you give feedback, but also how you identify someone's working ethic and the skills that they have as well. If you have two educators assessing the same student, you'll often get a little bit of a disparity in what they see, and that's because we all have our own biases, rightly or wrongly. There isn't. We all have our own values and opinions. Conflict can sometimes occur, so hopefully not regularly, but sometimes, particularly if someone may feel that they are being personally attacked. I don't mean viciously attacked, I just mean the feedback that they're giving, they feel like there's been a personal attack on their own beliefs and values, then they can potentially put their barriers up as well and can cause conflict. So it's just about how to address those. Again, it's not necessarily always just down to the educator either. It can be getting team members involved or academic advisors involved and working through that way. Obviously, time pressures is a big thing. Time pressures in any setting are always going to be the biggest factor. And it's just how do you get around these time pressures to focus your feedback, assess it yourself, and give yourself some clear and constructive feedback to give to the students, and find the time to actually then give it to the student. But planning ahead and having a really clear structure can often help. So the potential downfalls are probably quite apparent and quite easy to identify based on your own knowledge and skills and experience of having feedback. So too much negative feedback will obviously lower self-esteem, can demotivate, and it can be really hard to not give too much negative when somebody is doing quite a lot of things wrong. But also, if someone's doing something really right, you might think they're really great, but actually, I need to address things that they can work on. So even though they're doing amazingly, going, well, this and this and this is what you need to work on, and they're going, oh God, I thought I was doing really well, and all you're telling me is things I need to work on. Too much positives, again, if there's too much positive, they don't know if they need anything to work on, how to improve, what improvements they need to make. And so again, you need the balance of both because there's always both. No matter how strong or weak a student is, there's always some negative and some positive. And some students really reject criticism, just the same as some staff really reject it. They really struggle to have that criticism. So explore why is it that it might be something that you're doing. It might be they've had really bad criticism in the past and they really struggle to hear it, or they just need it written in a different way or vocalized in a different way. So it's just finding out, because there's not always just one reason. It's not just that they think they're really good and they can't accept that they're not doing everything perfectly. Obviously, there is always the odd person out there that may act like that, but for the most part, it's a different reason. So you just need to explore why. And there we go. That is the end of the feedback. So take a minute to just have a think about what it is that you think are the most important factors about feedback and what it is that you might need to address yourself and your skills. Stop.